This podcast feels like a Christmas morning for me. I've wanted to interview this guy for a long time. This is Grant Romney. Grant is my uncle. He's also a dear friend. I've always looked up to Grant all growing up. He would come out and during his experiences leading a team and selling throughout the summers, he would pop in after while he was going to school at BYU with me, my parents on Sundays, and I would always look up to him and love his stories. And I think one of the coolest things that I've been able to see your journey kind of go through of being a sales rep to then owning your own business at Green Guard, and everything that you've been able to accomplish there. It's just been really cool to watch, and I'm glad you were willing to come on and share some knowledge with all of us here.
Glad to be here.
Well, Grant, just kind of getting into it, just give us a little introduction to you, kind of origin story, how you got into door to door, and just walk us beginning life to kind of moving forward to starting your business.
So it all started back. I actually was at the end of high school, and Greg, who's my brother, Dawson obviously knows him. So he recruited me to go sell pest control for another company. We went to Virginia.
What was the company?
Callahan's. It's a no-name company out there. So we went for some no-name company out there. I decided to get done with high school early. So I graduated, I think it was a month and a half, 2 months early, nothing crazy, but I was kind of over it. And so I went out there and we started selling. And it was actually a short summer because, with Greg and the guy that we were working for was kind of dishonest. And so anyways, I did well enough there. Greg started his business the next year, and so I started selling for Greg. That's when it became Romney. So, and then that was actually a short summer. That was right before I went and left on a mission, came back and had many more years. And so that's kind of where it all started. From there, I worked through college, and as I came to the end of college, I had success with doing pest control, and so I was getting an accounting degree, and Greg was like, you might want to look at this before you just jump out and go be an accountant somewhere. And so I thought about that the next year before I graduated, and I decided I was going to go ahead and do pest control. And yeah, the rest is history, I guess. So I haven't gotten out. I've got sucked in, and yeah, I haven't left.
that vortex is strong, especially in our family. Well, and was that a tough decision for you? I've talked with you a little bit about that, but never, I guess, in great depth of being you're like, hey, I wanted to get a more of a corporate job and going and starting your own business. Was that tough? Being hey, maybe I want to go jump into and did you ever think about maybe a different sales opportunity or anything like that? Or was it no, it was either that, it was either opening your own company or joining an accounting firm? Yeah.
So that was kind of what it was between was, am I going to go do something in corporate America? The plan was if I stayed in corporate America, I was going to go on and do, maybe an MBA or something like that. And so it was deciding, do I really want to stay in pest control the rest of my life or not? And I had to think about it and what the pros and cons of that would be. And, me and Zandra talked about that a lot and decided to finally stick with it.
Cool.
So
cool. Shout out to Zandra, by the way. She's awesome. And I still, one of my biggest apologies to you and Zandra is missing your guys' wedding forever ago. I still think about that all the time when my mom signed me up for a church play and I missed it.
We're still mad.
Yeah. But kind of so obviously every summer sales team, every organization that you go through, there's the people that you see that were crazy successful. You hear about all the legends and stuff. And my entire sales experience at Romney Pest Control, you were always the person I always heard, Grant did this before he went out. This is what he sold in the summer. And I remember my first day after I'd sold, I went into the office and they started pointing at the leaderboard of all-time sales. And your name was just smothered at the top of that board. It was like if you took the top 10, I swear there was 6 or 7 summers of Grant Romney at the top of that board. And So I remember when I first looked at it and I saw how many sales you had in the summer, I was like, they made those numbers up. Like there's no way like that. Like he sold 400 in the summer and I just want to know, did that happen to you ever? Like when you started? Like was there anyone that was like an urban legend when you started that you're like, oh dude, like that's crazy, or it was overwhelming at the beginning to be like, I don't know if I could ever achieve that or sell that many or stuff like that?
Well, again, I guess that was kind of different for me because we went and sold for a really small company. I guess the urban legend was the guy that we were working for. I'd hear about how many he would sell. And, I mean, honestly, in the beginning, like I just came out of high school and I was just trying to see if I could actually do it. So I don't know if I was necessarily as concerned with trying to keep up with who the leader was. You'd hear about crazy people in other companies. There's names that were tossed around. But I was just trying to see if this would be something worthwhile for me. So I guess I wasn't overwhelmed because I didn't set my expectations too high from the beginning.
Mm. That's good. So that's a healthy way to look at it. And kind of walk me through those. So when I first got into door-to-door, I remember I really, really wanted to see you pitch. Like that was like something that was like big for me. Like I wanted to see how your secret sauce, and I think everyone gets into that. Mm-hmm. And you were always telling me like there is no secret sauce. Like it's just kind of getting out and hard work. And I feel like I learned that part later after you were willing to show me your pitch. But I think it's both, right? I think there is like a certain element of like, dude, you just got to go in, put in the effort, and get after it. But you kind of like pitching with me and showing me in those early days, like, hey, this is what I do. And one of the things you gave me that was like super helpful was like learning how to move people. And like when they open the door, taking a slight step back. You talked to me about moving people in the yard and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I guess when people come out, what are some signs to you? And this is for first year reps or people kind of coming through. What are some good signs that like, hey, this is a good time to like move the customer to either the backyard, take a slight step back, or like different things like that?
Yeah, so I guess one of the things I learned, and this is probably, I'm just using this as an example of I don't do it, it's not something as important anymore. But when I first started, we'd try to get people to the backyard. And I just don't even want to waste my time going that far anymore. So I might pull them out somewhere in the front yard. But anyways, kind of on what you're saying, the importance of moving people around. There's kind of an invisible barrier at the front door. And so sometimes it is very valuable if you can get someone outside of that, because once someone comes through the front door, a shield comes down and all of a sudden you're a different person. But that initial reaction at the front door is a standoff. And so you're trying to overcome whether they're going to close that right away. And that's one of the ways to try to overcome that is to move them outside of the door, or these other ones you're talking about, how I would stand at the door with people. I would, and these are just things that I learned from other people along the way, but I'd never like to stand directly on with people. I'd like to stand kind of side shoulder with them as I'm pointing stuff out in the yard. Kind of keeps it more, less of a tense exchange, whereas if you're standing face to face with somebody, it's like, who's going to win this, me or you, Yeah. So that's another one of them.
Another one clear as day I can remember that you showed me is back in the day we signed people up on paper, like, which now to me sounds like archaic. Like, it sounds just like I can't believe we ever did that.
I'm a dinosaur in this industry.
Yeah. But I remember you told me, you're like, I always make sure to hand them or show them the clipboard like a server at a table, and I thought that was cool that like you were just really good at making sure that they were comfortable on that. But what are some other? Sorry, I cut you off.
No, you're fine. The only other one I was really thinking about, and you kind of hit on all of them, was, when somebody gives me a concern for some reason, or they're trying to almost shut it down for some reason, that step back, and it almost was just non-verbally letting them know, like, I hear you, but I wasn't done yet. It's hard to kind of share that in a podcast. If people probably can't visualize it, but there's kind of this step back that I do, letting them know I hear them before I came back in with something else. So.
And it's not a big step back, right? It's kind of like a small half step and just kind of like, allowing them to feel like you're giving them space.
Yep.
And I think that's the biggest thing is when you are on that porch, making sure that they are aware that like, hey, I am going to give you enough room to operate. Because so much of a sale is just getting them comfortable with like you being there, the process starting, and moving forward.
The other thing that's just funny, I'll say on that, I remember training guys and I'd do my step back and they thought I was done, and they'd kind of ruin the sale a little bit because they'd start walking off, and I'm like, so I'd talk to them in between doors like, hey, you don't walk off that door until I'm done. So, but yeah, because anyways, they non-verbally didn't understand what I was doing. So.
Yeah. And talk to me really quick, like you're very goal driven. Like I've seen like so many like how you pencil and budget things. I've seen also too like obviously how well you've sold, and then just like you're very analytical and you're good at like breaking things apart and kind of setting it like, hey, this is how I'm going to accomplish this. For like all those people starting or kind of like getting into this industry, what were some things that help keep you motivated towards your goal or looking at it, or what would you do back in the day or even currently to like be like, hey, this is what keeps me straight kind of like on my goals?
Yeah, I mean, my goal was to be able to just, I guess my number one goal was not to have to work at school. That was my number one goal. And I knew what a sale was worth. I knew how many I needed to get, and I knew how many I needed to break that down into a day and how many I needed to get each day. So, yeah, and for some people that might not be as motivating. We were talking a little bit before we started this that some people, everyone has different motivations, and some people are motivated by money, some people aren't. Some people are motivated by position, to be given a title. And, just for example, off those two things, I could care less about a title. The fact that I'm still in the door-to-door industry lets you know I don't care anything about a title. But there's money in the door-to-door pest industry, and to some degree, money is a motivation for me. It's one of my motivations in life, not my only. But so anyways, that's how I stayed driven, is understanding the numbers of it, what I needed to have, and what that ultimately would give me was freedom during the school year, back when I was in college. And ultimately that would give me more freedoms going forward as I started deciding, what I needed that money for moving forward as well.
And what's crazy is like hearing you talk about it, like I can tell how real and how you were good at just kind of like bringing it to the forefront of your mind throughout the summer. I think a lot of times people get really, really bad at like going back to like, this is why I'm doing it. You're not doing it for the money. You're doing it for the freedom that the opportunity can buy. And so I think anyone that's listening to this, that's something that's big, is you can be like, remind yourself, I'm doing this for X, Y, Z, for the house, the car, the new situation that I can go into. And bringing your mind back to that will change your action on like a day-to-day. So cool. Well, the other thing is like summer sales is no easy task. Dealing with adversity, like it's hot. It's something that puts you out of your comfort zone. When I think of things like sports, missions, summer sales, they're all things that like you have to do a lot of things you don't want to do in order to become a better person. And I think a lot of times when people think about their summer sales journey, they're like, oh, it was hot or it was tough, and I don't know like if I can get through it. Whenever like I like kind of towards the tail end of like when I was selling for other people before I jumped into selling my company, one of the things that amazed me about you is like I still knew you were out selling, and you'd gone through chemotherapy, had cancer, but you would still get out even in the summers, grab a chair, and like because you had it in your back and you couldn't even stand up on the porch, but you'd still go out, set up a chair, and knock and through and kind of talk with people about like still sell. You were still able to sell every year and kind of get out and make that happen for you, your company, your family. And when I heard that, I would always tell my guys, I'm like, hey, my uncle, like he has cancer, but he still goes out, and even though he's not 100% physically capable, he knows what he's got to accomplish to take care of everybody. And that was always just a super inspiring story for me. And like I never told you this, but it was always just so cool to like. It was just a great lesson in perseverance for me. I was like, dude, my uncle's a really hard worker, and he's taught me so much through that. So.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I appreciate it. I guess I don't have much to say on that. I mean, it is true. That I went out and did that, and I just knew what had to get done at the end of the day. So.
Yeah. And but like working through like when you were talking and leading teams and stuff like that, what were some things that people did? What were some like? How would you motivate guys to kind of like this is more for team leaders and stuff, like when people would come in and complain and you'd hear the negative chatter in the locker room of like, I don't know if I want to go out, this sucks. What were some things you would do as a manager to kind of like keep the room positive and keep people actually moving forward?
That's a good question. What would I do? I mean, this might sound obvious, but I mean, first off, you got to lead by example. I mean, I think everyone's had an experience of a team leader or that they know isn't working as hard as the rest of the team. And so, hopefully that team leader, in order to have success, you got to lead by example. So I guess I would just talk from my own experience I remember leading teams, and I don't say this in a bragging way. I just honestly, I knew what was happening. I was the first guy out the door, and I was typically the last guy home at night. So what I mean by the first out the door is there's always the team chatter after the meeting, and people are kind of hanging around for a bit. And sometimes that hanging out could extend, longer than it probably needed to, and was cutting into people's day, and time is money in this job. And so anyways, I knew what the numbers were. I knew that every hour I missed off the door was potentially sales I was missing. So I guess I would just say I try to lead by example. So
love it. No, and that's so simple. And I honestly think a lot of times people can get like, that's number one, making sure you're in a good place to like then help other people. Because if you're not doing that, if you never do that, you can't even know how to help other people just because you've never conquered that mountain or climbed it. Mm-hmm. But I also, and I think, I think that's really good. And I think so many times people try to find other weird exterior motivations to be like, this is how I'm going to get everyone to do it. When in reality, just like leading from the front's the best thing to do. So, yeah, I've definitely seen that in managers over the years, that the best ones are typically the ones out ripping.
Yeah.
So it's cool. And the first to go and the last to leave, like on the doors, it's I think that's something that get lost a lot of times too. People get really focused in on like sales psychology and like, what are you saying on the door? Yeah. What's that one golden like nugget or bullet? And I think it's like Mother Teresa has a quote where it's like, there are no great things, only small things with great love. And I think you learn so much of like those small little things, mm-hmm. like in just going out, getting that experience, to where then it ends up being like a big summer or a big opportunity, and you're able to accomplish those.
I think just kind of in what you're saying right now, I hope I don't lead us off too much, but over the years there was multiple guys that would always, the comment I always remember is, I'm saying the same thing as Grant, but I'm not getting the same thing, the same number of sales. And constantly we'd be telling them, you might be saying the same thing, but you're not saying the same thing. Like they think they'd go up to the door moping and kind of just pissed off that they're out there, it's hot, and they want to go take a day off. And just because the words are coming out of their mouth, that their body, there's so many ways that we communicate, how we're standing there, what our tone is in our voice, where we emphasize things or de-emphasize things. It might be the same words, but it's not the same communication. So that was something we'd always be hitting on with guys.
No, I love it. And just carrying with a smile and actually having a good attitude, it's like, it's tangible and you can feel it. Like my dad would always say, like, he's like, I can deal with anything except for complaining. And I always heard that, and I'm like, yeah, like the minute the attitude and the spirit of the room gets negative, you almost can't continue forward just because there's no life. Mm-hmm. It's just like, how can I lift everybody else up? And if you have too much dead weight in an office, a lot of times getting rid of that is what's going to change it, because that's how you're going to move forward, is you have to have enough smiles to go around.
Yep.
So talk to me really quick on, I always love to ask people some of their favorite closes. Is there any ones that you've learned in the past, like coming years, that you're like, this has been a good soft close or a good hard close to kind of continue the sale and get more people like on board with what I need to do?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think like from a cold start here what that would be. I mean, I know one of my closes a lot of times would be something like, hey, sorry, I'm just trying to phrase this right, but like, I'd keep it real soft and not hitting at them real direct, but I'd be like, yeah, so our guys are out here tomorrow. Are you home tomorrow? Something like that. And then they can answer that from there. That was probably one of them.
That's cool. And that's almost preemptively. That's like a soft close leading up to the hard. Yeah, I like that a lot, actually. That's cool. And one of my favorite ones that you gave me too that I liked when I started out was like asking them if their backyard was pretty similar to the front, like size or grass or stuff like that. It was a great option close to kind of continue the sale. But I always, every time I'm like talking to you or hearing you, I always love to like trying to like steal a different like flake or something else that you used over the years. I remember when you first explained Demand CS, and maybe one day they'll come out with like a different product that we'll all jump on and use, but like we've used the same product for
one time.
Yeah, what was it back in the, like, has it always been that?
Yeah, I've always sold Demand CS. So.
But I think one thing that I've seen over the years with the different summers is a lot of times people don't know enough about the product to sell it well, and sometimes people know too much or they tell too much about the product. Yep. For it to even be able to be sold. Mm-hmm. But you always did a really, really good job of explaining demand in a way that was simple, but also helped the customer see that there was a greater level of value to the product you were putting out around their home. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, would you agree that that's an important thing to your, like an important arrow in your quiver when you're going out, to be able to explain demand in like a really healthy way, but without oversharing on it? And how do you do that?
Yeah, so I think, kind of off what you're saying, because I've seen salesmen who do this, like before even talking about demand, it's understanding who you're talking to, engaging where they're at, because there's some people that don't need much explanation. They just have a need, and if you can confidently share the solution with them, they're ready to go right there. And then there's other people that might be more skeptical. They're still trying to trust if you're selling snake oil or what you're selling, and they might, whether that's questions that they're asking you or you can just see it in their face, their facial reactions. There's going to be some people that you can tell need more of an explanation. So I would say, yeah, it's just important being able to read people and understanding how much of an explanation they need. So sorry, what was your question after that? I kind of got off track.
No, that was great. I love where you took that. And I think there's three things that you're actually reading when you're out. You're reading the script, you're reading the person, and you're reading your area. Mm-hmm. And you need to know where to be, who has the correct temperature, and then also like you need to know enough about what you're selling in order to push it through. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of times where I see people pigeonhole themselves is they'll get so focused on one part of that they lose like the other parts, which in turn prevents so many sales. Mm-hmm. So I think if you can get really good at like you're saying, like you have to read the customer just as much as you're good at like reading the label, explaining it, all that good stuff.
And that kind of goes back to what I was saying, that you might think you're saying the same thing as Dawson or your team leader or whoever it is, but if you can't read the person, then you're not saying the same thing. There's understanding where you need to navigate and go. You might be going the wrong way because you can't read someone, if that makes sense.
As far as like, I mean, you've nearly had 2 decades of, when was your first summer?
2002.
So you have more than 2 decades of like direct to consumer like selling and stuff like that.
Yeah.
What were some of the lessons you feel like, as far as like value and like what the jobs taught you and stuff like that? What are some things you felt like you learned early on, and then maybe kind of like more towards like now that you're like, these were huge benefits to my life from this job? Like just like intangible skills, I guess. I
think one thing for sure, and this goes right into like missionary work as well, because it's another thing that did it, was doing something that wasn't easy and accomplishing the task at hand. Like there's confidence to be built by completing something. Everybody's going to have experience who's been in this industry of seeing guys go home early for whatever reason, not finishing it out. And is it an easy job? No, it's not easy. But if you can figure out how to grind through and find success in it, there's also confidence to be built in the end by succeeding. And that doesn't necessarily mean that your numbers were as high as the highest guy on the team, but that you went out and did something hard and accomplished it. So
that's cool. So you've always been good at like I feel like accounting and managing your book of business. I mean, obviously that's what you got your degree in and stuff. But I mean, a lot of guys can go out and even have like one good summer, or they can have like a good make a lot of money and then like blow it. But you've always been really good at like making your money work for you and kind of balancing it off over the years and just understanding a balance sheet. I mean, is that something you feel like you can just learn at school? Is that something that kind of comes over time? Like, where are some benefits, I guess, for like, if you could recommend to someone starting, like, hey, this is the first time I've made some real money. How can I put that to use? How should I manage it? How should I look at it, kind of going forward in the years?
So what would be a good starting point to use their money?
Yeah.
I mean, the thing that was always taught to me by more than like my brother was one of them, but also professors at college. I think a great starting point is a Roth IRA. You know, that's where I always started with my money. And so, yeah, that was the initial first place where I started putting money. And then I would say after that, you know, I realized that starting a business would be potentially something I was going to look at. And I knew if that was something I was going to do, I was going to need capital. And so, you know, each summer I was putting money away because for me personally, I needed money to go out and pay people. So, or for, you know, equipment, trucks, things like that. So yeah, those are the things I started putting money towards. And as I've gone through later in life, there's been different avenues that I put money towards.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And so, some of the coolest people I got to meet were some of the people I like met through summer sales and like the lessons I've learned and stuff like that. I mean, you guys had a really cool group of guys going through when you were selling, like back at Romney. It was like you, Pete Updike, Jared Green. There's like, and I know the list is longer than that, but those were always the guys that I heard about and stuff. What was it like being around like all those people? Like, what was the environment like? And have you been in many circles, like, I guess, like cooler than that? Or like, was that like one of the, like the cooler group of people? Like, talk to me just like about like the culture and the opportunity that was.
Yeah, I think the best environment I was ever in, like that was a good one too. Jared and Pete and all of them, that was a great environment. Probably my number one environment I ever thought about was when I was down in San Antonio. There was just a whole crew of guys down there, and every one of them were willing to work. And so it's just nice to be in an environment where there's almost like, I don't know if synergy is the right word, but just everyone is kind of going off each other's energy and no one's pulling away from it. So that was a great summer. I mean,
were there that summer in San Antonio? Were there negative influences there that you had to cut out, like in the beginning, or was it just like no, like the majority of that team just kind of like from the get go was it a garden you had to cultivate, or was it kind of like a lot of it was like there in the beginning?
Yeah, no, there was there was a couple that didn't end up staying and whatnot, and so the thing is we just had so many. So yes, there are people that went home. And I probably don't think about them as much because it was the core group of guys at the end that were still there. But we outnumbered the naysayers or the negative voices in the room. So.
And one thing I think with like a team like that, if the middle of the room is all on board, it's so much easier to have a good summer.
Yeah.
And like I think with teams, if you're too bottom heavy and like there's most of the people aren't on board with like the schedule, like learning, growing, and all that stuff throughout the summer, it's gonna be a long ride.
Yeah. And
so, like, if you can have like, and I imagine that there's probably more than like half the guys that were all sound like a great team, that can like all go through and make it. You're gonna have like a way. It's a fun environment to be in rather than like, oh, we're gonna go do something hard every day.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that's cool. Cool. And I mean, you've come out and like made yourself like at home. Texas is your home now. You got the Mavs shirt on. They're playing tonight.
Let's go Mavs.
Hopefully getting the dub.
Yeah.
Against the Celtics.
Game 2, guys. Game 2.
So you calling the win tonight?
I think they've got a good shot. I think they're overconfident to be like they're going to smash them, but I think they got a shot.
Okay, well, hopefully when we release this, it's like you were an oracle. That's cool. Well, you've made Texas your home, and like I guess what are some fun things around, like all of our most of our branches are in Texas.
Yeah.
What are some like staple things that you're like, oh, you got to do this while you're in Dallas or in San Antonio?
San Antonio, you probably need to go to the Schlitterbahn or go float the river. I think it's the Guadalupe River down there. Go get an inner tube and then go eat at the grist mill after you do that.
Eat the what?
The grist mill. It's in, I want to say it's in Bernie. I think maybe I could be wrong on that, but it's around the Guadalupe River up there.
And what do they have up there? Like what is like?
They have this steak sandwich that's amazing. Yeah, it's just melted cheese all over it. It's good.
Okay, I've done the other two. I haven't went there though. I'll have to try that out. Okay.
Oh yeah, up in Dallas, you got to go catch some sports games. Mavericks games or baseball, whatever, something like that.
That's cool. So, I mean. You started Green Guard now 13 years ago?
Yeah, 13 years ago.
So talk to me about like jumping from like kind of being like a sales rep to then owning your own business. What were some big life lessons you learned there? Kind of transitioning from like selling for somebody else then to owning your own company. And what were some of the lessons that you kind of picked up along that way?
Yeah, I think it just comes with time and experience. I think I'm not a perfect manager at this point, but I'll tell you at this point, I'm a much better manager than I was at the beginning. I think when you're first figuring out how to lead people, maybe you might at times think you can force the way you want people to do things on them. Whether that's by, I know I probably had times where I raised my voice or whatever, and at the point you've gotten there, you've already lost the battle, managing people is a lot more about persuasion than it is force. So that's something I've learned along the way.
100%. And along that same line too, it's about, I think it's about recruiting the right people. A lot of times like management problems, like I think when I first got like hiring people or bringing people on my team, I would like try to make them be like think like me, act like me, and then it's kind of like, have you seen the movie Moneyball?
Yeah,
it's kind of like I like in that movie how they're like we don't have the bankroll initially to like be like the Yankees or the Red Sox or anything like that, but like we can try to get the best out of like the people that we like can be with, can afford right now, and then like they ended up like obviously we can end up winning a championship, but like if you can get really good at just like finding the best in people, bringing that to the forward, and then if you've already done that, you've already like fanned the flame of like their best talents and attributes and stuff, and they're not living up to it, I think it's always in your best interest and their best interest to probably be like, hey, this we tried, we gave it the good honest college try, but it's probably time to go part ways or find something else.
Well, and to shout out to Moneyball again, that's if you watch the scene where how he gets rid of somebody, that's a lot to be learned there.
Yeah, would you rather have would you rather have 7 shots to the chest or 1 shot to the head?
Exactly. It's like just get it done.
No, 100%. Addition by subtraction is a real thing in business, and sometimes like that's what you need to do. But also, it's really cool when you do have like. What do you call that? When you have like a disagreement in business where like you feel like someone's letting you down in some way, it is cool when you can kind of like go to them, healthily communicate, and then actually get on the same page and get through it. And those are some of my favorite like experiences in business. Mm-hmm. Do you have any like that where you're like, hey, we maybe me and so and so, me and this technician, me and this operator, me and this like sales rep, we weren't initially aligned, but we came together on this and kind of moved forward. Any experiences like that or anything that you can share?
Yeah, I mean, just I don't know if it's like a clear one experience I'm thinking of, but again, just kind of what we're saying that there's been times with technicians to successfully lead people, you still have to have boundaries. Even though it's about persuasion, you can't be a pushover either at the same time. And so it's learning over the years of how to effectively let people know what your boundaries are without just obliterating them, and at the same time coaching them and persuading them along the way to follow the vision, the goal, the path.
I like that a lot. So in business, there's always things that we do really, really well, and there's things that are like, hey, like this is something I want to improve on. Or do you have two things like that? You're like, hey, this is like one thing that I think I'm really gifted at, and this is important to watch in business. And then you're like, hey, what's the one thing that I'm like, man, I probably like, I'd like to change that, I need to change that. This is something that I think can help all kind of like entrepreneurs.
I think in business, I'm really good at the details. I'm very good at keeping things in order, compartmentalizing things. What I could be a lot better at is, how would I say it? Just not necessarily building teams, but just this sounds really off because I had success in sales, but I'm probably not the best people person. So like, in an organization like pest control, the most value is when you can build teams, when you can network, when you can do those things. And that wasn't where my strength was. It's fine. It's worked out for me in the long run, but I'd had more success in my life if I was good at those things.
And I think you are a great people person. I think I agree with you too that we all like there's always things that like it's good to be aware of both of those. I think a lot of times in business people like either want to sing praises all the time or they like always want to get down like, hey, I'm not good at X or Y. And I think just being aware of all the time, being like, okay, what am I good at? Because I need to lean on that. And then what can I get better at? And just being aware of that. And I think a lot of times we get so used to like focusing on one or the other. But I think yo-yoing back and forth throughout the summers is really important to be like, hey, this is what I need to change and this is what I do well.
Yeah.
Okay, so with 20 years of direct sales, there's got to be some crazy story that's happened with a customer on a porch once or twice.
Oh yeah.
Do you have any ones that you're like? Do you have any ones that you're like? This one was a great one to share, or this was funny, or anything like that?
I mean, there's a time where a guy came to the door with a gun, and I don't think he knew I knew he had a gun. He had one of those side windows, like right next to his door, that was like rectangle. Yeah. And I could see him kind of like holding a gun back, like coming to the door, like, who's that? And I just knew once he opened that door, I was like, whatever his reason that he doesn't want it, I'm not fighting it. I'm like, okay, you have a good day.
Was it like a pistol or was it like?
Yeah, he had a pistol. I was like, this guy's off his rocker. So I got out of there. I think if you've done sales long enough, you've got some crazy dog stories. Like, I got bit in the forearm by a dog. I had another dog bite my ankle, and I was signing the lady up and kicked my ankle, or bit my ankle, and I kicked that dog. And she was like kind of thrown back, and I was like, your dog bit me. And she kind of felt bad. So there's multiple dog bites, which causes family drama today because I don't want a dog and my wife does. But dogs can definitely like mess up a sales pitch. Yeah. Oh, they do all the time. Dogs and crying babies.
Yes. But I feel like a lot of times people get like to your first story when people come up and threaten. I always love when sales reps come in the meeting and they want to talk to you about the guy that threatened them with a gun, the guy that like was yelling at them. Like, what do you say when they say that? And it's funny. I think you have to learn in sales to be really good at like letting things just roll off your back, because those people I never even thought like, hey, I should try to switch them over. But a lot of times people will get really focused on like that negative energy that they felt really intense. And one thing that I learned through like watching you, or watching Greg, and watching like so many like, or just getting into sales, is I had to be really good at learning to be like, oh, like that was just a crazy person. Let's just carry on and go to the next thing. Yeah. And I think that's an important life lesson, especially when you're starting, to not internalize negative energy and to kind of just be like, hey, we're going to keep moving forward, even though someone's trying to come at me in a weird way.
One thing that's changed for me a lot in sales from day one to down the road, I remember I was trained by my brother, and the way I saw it, I had no experience at the time, and the way I saw what he was doing, I was like, oh, you just talk. Just keep talking to him, and you'll get them. And it's not necessarily, I guess what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of people I don't even waste my time with anymore because I'm able to gauge how serious, how interested people are now. And just being able to gauge that better now instead of just trying to talk someone's ear off who it's a total waste of your time.
And people always want you to tell them, like, when is that? But part of it, I just don't think you can, like, learn other than just getting out and getting in front of people.
Yeah.
And that's what's tough is, like, when people are like, well, who should I give up on? Who should I not? And it's like, so much, you can't give that to somebody. That's oil you got to go get by yourself.
And it's a hard thing to have guys who have no experience hear that, because they might think where they should give up isn't the right point. You know what I mean? So they might give up too early. But, just learning where you shouldn't be wasting your time. Because, one other story I'll just tell with that is my sister, Heather, Dawson's aunt, she was talking to my brother one time. She's like, okay, I want to hear your sales pitch. You go ahead and sell me. I want to see if you can sell me. And she finally, like, got him to do a pitch, and she just, like, turned him down right away. And she's like, how do you sell so many people? Like, you didn't sell me. And just so everyone knows, like, I wasn't here for this. This is a story that was told to me by Greg, but I still remember he told her, he's like, you're not someone I would sell, you know? And so that's kind of the whole thing is, like, you know, yes, there are things we can do in sales to help push things forward. And we can do so much, but at the end of the day, there are people that it's just not going to happen. And so just move on to the next door and find someone that's worth your time.
Yeah.
So,
well, and selling really is helping. I think when you watch movies or you see it iterated in, like, through conversation, people think that, like, salesmanship is like snake oiling.
Yeah.
When if you're doing that, man, sales is going to be a long, hard road for you mainly, and for the customers that you sign up. But if you can get really good at focusing on, like, who can I help? How can I get them to that decision if that's something that they are thinking about and kind of teetering on?
mm-hmm.
And if you can tip over all those people, you're going to have a great experience.
Yeah.
And so I think, just focusing on that energy and that light is big. Well, cool. I guess one last thing before we kind of, like, hop off. Is there anything you'd say to, like, someone that's starting out? You're like, hey, like, they're going through the thick of it. They haven't had a great start. What would you say to that person that's, like, had maybe a slow start? What would you say to focus on or to keep in their back of their head kind of in beginning in sales?
I'd say to answer these questions honestly to yourself, and that is, how much time are you out there? And number two is, what do you think your attitude is about the situation? And I get one other thing I'd give them on top of that. Sorry if I'm giving too much, but I'd say three things. After you've answered those questions, and if they're the right answers, that is, how much do you want to learn? Because I've been in meetings with guys that were first years. I'll tell a quick story. We kind of had, like, a superstar team that one year you were referring to in Dallas, and there was a guy, Jared Green. He was the team leader, and then there was me and Pete, and we weren't team leaders, but we just happened to all be together that year, and we all sold a lot, and we knew we were good at sales. And honestly, like, just to help out the team and Jared and everything we were doing, like, me and Pete offered, we said, hey, you know what? While you do the meetings, if people want to do one-on-ones with us on the side, we'll go to these side rooms and we'll get with them one-on-one. And so they had a ton of people that could give them experience. And what I will never forget from that, it was crazy. So we'd send out a sign-up list, like, sign up if you want, and then as we go through the week, we'll get to you. And there was first-year guys that were sucking out there, and they just passed the list on. And we're like, we'd even call them on it, like, hey, are you sure you didn't want to get with either, like, Pete or me or Jared or someone? And they're like, no, I'm good. And I don't know if that was pride. I don't know if it was, like, they just didn't care to learn. You know, like, maybe they just knew it was going to suck or whatever. But so anyways, all that said, just going back to, how much do you really want to learn? Because you're only going to learn as much as you let in.
Yeah. No, and that when that apathy does creep in with people like that, it's crazy to me to see, because you're spending all day, every day doing that thing and finding, and what I'm shocked about too is, like, everyone at the morning meeting, the manager will always get up and be like, hey, is there anything we all want to work on? And typically at the beginning of the room, it's dead quiet. Like, no one wants to be the guy that raises their hand and be like, hey, I'd like to work at this. But the first kid that typically does chirp up and say, hey, actually, I'd like to learn X or Y or Z, that's always the person that I see every year that moves, like, sales-wise, to the front of the room, the front of the leaderboard. Yep. And so, like, if you are, I think, in that situation where it's like, hey, I haven't sold that many or stuff like that, just be willing the next day to just be the person that signs up on the sign-up sheet, raises the hand, takes just that beginning initial action. There's an old saying, like, the hardest door is the card door in, like, sales. Mm-hmm. And I think that's even before the card door, there's that of being like, hey, like, do I just mentally and emotionally want to get up and get after this?
Yeah.
So I love that. I'm glad you added that one in. That was a great tail end of the pod. But Grant, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah.
Thanks for helping me out my first year when I was crying, wanting to quit. So I appreciate you getting me through that summer and always taking time and helping me. So
Yeah, glad to be here.
okay, love you, Grant.